Today is November 6th, 2023. The time is 5:04 a.m. and I'm making this video because I want to get my opinion out. So in this video, it's saying here the title is what's important here. Israeli ambassador for the US says Hamas is playing for time in releasing the hostages. And time is of essence here. We're talking about time. And it's saying here that Hamas is playing for time, but the opposite is true. Israel is actually playing for time. Netanyahu is playing for time. And why is Netanyahu playing for time? Judicial reform. In the background of this Hamas conflict, and it is a conflict, it is not a war because equal sides are not fighting against each other. Number one, Israel controls the water in Gaza. October 11th, 2023, Israel cut off the water in Gaza. 2.3 million Palestinians are without water in the desert. In the desert without water. So that's about approximately 24 days. How many people can survive without water for 24 days? So the situation in Gaza is dire. The world is requesting that Netanyahu stop it. Let's just put an end to this. But Netanyahu has reasons for not wanting to stop this conflict in Gaza. And I'm going to go through some headlines just to show you what's lurking in the background, awaiting Israel once this conflict is brought to an end. We're going to start here. And I'm going to go up. This is the Jewish News Syndicate. Tel Aviv mayor, dictatorships only become democracies again with bloodshed. Ron, whoever, spoke at a demonstration against the judicial reform plan. Israel is headed towards dictatorship and bloodshed if the government moves forward with its judicial reform plan, Tel Aviv Mayor Ron Houday said on Monday. Something we won't let happen, he added. This is the history of the world. Countries become dictatorships through the use of democratic tools. Countries do not become democratic again except with bloodshed, Houday said. The Knesset Constitution, Law and Justice Committee on Monday voted to send the first bill in the government's judicial reform package for its first reading in the full plenum, which is likely to take place next week. The bill has been formulated as an amendment to basic law, judiciary, and would give the government control over the Judicial Selection Committee, with 5 of the panel's 9 members and only a simple majority needed to appoint judges to Israeli courts. Opponents of this particular change argue that it would give the coalition too much power, whereas proponents have pointed to the U.S. Senate, which approves Supreme Court justices by simple majority, often along partisan lines. Before the committee vote, opposition lawmakers shouted down members of the coalition, with some having to be physically restrained. Many parliamentarians were ejected from the meeting. Houday referred to it as a black day, in which the decision was made to turn Israel into a dictatorship and a state of halakha, meaning a state governed by Jewish religious law. The mayor's words were criticized by both sides of the aisle. Members of Knesset, Benny Gantz, leader of the National Unity Party, who opposes the judicial reform plan, tweeted, "We are in an emergency situation and we are in a fight. But our struggle is for Israeli democracy, not a struggle between us. The plan and the pain and fear have their place, But we must immediately stop the violent discourse and rampage on both sides that would send us into the abyss. Now, that's an interesting word to use, abyss. The dictionary says abyss is a deep or seemingly bottomless chasm, a wide or profound difference between people, a gulf, the abyss between the two nations, the regions of hell conceived of as a bottomless pit, Satan's dark abyss. Give you an idea of how dreadful this situation is in Israel right now. And here is the president of Israel warning of the civil war. This is the Times of Israel. And this is dated March 15th, 2023. Warning of civil war. Herzog unveils framework for judicial reform. Prime Minister rejects it. President says proposals preserves Israel as a Jewish democracy, ensures judicial independence. Netanyahu, it doesn't bring the necessary balance. Gantz accepts it, Lapid weighs it. President Isaac Herzog on Wednesday unveiled his People's Framework proposal to replace the government's plan to radically overhaul the judicial system. In a primetime address to the nation in which he urged both sides of the debate not to destroy the country in a power struggle over the judiciary, but rather seize the opportunity for a formative constitutional moment. Herzog called his plan, drafted after hundreds of hours of deliberation in recent weeks with politicians, jurists, and experts from across the political spectrum, a golden path that offers the best chance for a broad national agreement on reform. This framework protects each and every one of you, the citizens of Israel, he said. This framework protects Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. He said his framework, if adopted, will constitute a victory for all Israelis. The proposal is fully obligated to the principles of the Declaration of Independence, he stressed. It entrenches the independence and autonomy of the judicial system and entrenches human rights and civil for all Israelis, men and women alike, including Israel's minorities. He warned that having heard passionate views on the controversy from hundreds of Israelis in recent weeks, those who think that a real civil war with human lives is a border we won't cross have no idea. In Israel's 75th year, the abyss, there's that word again, is within touching distance, he said. A civil war is a red line at any price and by any means. I won't let it happen. He said he heard real deep hatred, albeit from a very small minority of people. I heard from people from all sides that, heaven forbid, the idea of blood in the streets no longer shocks them. I'm going to just go on, and it says, former Israeli Prime Minister Olmert calls for war to stop judicial reform. War is not waged with speeches. War is waged in a face-to-face battle, head to head, hand to hand. And that is what will happen here, said Ehud Olmert. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert on Monday called for the protest movement against the government's judicial reform proposal to move to the next stage, one fueled by violent confrontation. What is needed is to move to the next stage, the stage of war. And war is not waged with speeches. War is waged in a face-to-face battle, head to head, hand to hand. And that is what happened here, he said in an interview with whatever. this, I want to go into this. We're talking about judicial reform here. And let's look at the etymology of judicial. Origin, it says late Middle English, from Latin judicalis, from judicum, judgment. And so what I'm just wanted to bring forth that judicial comes from the word judicum. Judicum means judgment. So we're talking about the judgment of Israel. And this is what the Prime Minister of Israel had to say. It says, do not drag Israel into anarchy, Netanyahu tells protesters amid judicial reform crises. The Prime Minister spoke after day of disturbances roiled Israel on Wednesday. Clashes with police resulted in minor injuries, dozens detained. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke out Wednesday against the violent protests that roiled Israel through the day, in some cases leading to clashes with police. Freedom of protest is not a license to drag the country into anarchy and chaos. A sovereign state cannot tolerate anarchy, Netanyahu said in a televised address. I know that there are many citizens who love their country and who passionately support their legal reform. And I know that there are also many other citizens who also love their country and who oppose the reform with equal fervor. But in a democracy, there are clear rules on how to conduct the debate. There are red lines that must not be crossed. And it does not matter how profound the debate, how stormy, how much it shakes the soul. The clear red line is a complete prohibition on violence and anarchy. The people are tens of thousands have joined protests against judicial overhaul. And I want to show you something else here. It said on May 6th, this is on May 7th, at coronation reception, King Charles said to praise Herzog for overhaul mediation. President reportedly tells United Kingdom monarch Israel is a vibrant democracy. During London event honoring attending foreign heads of states, Herzog shakes hands with leaders of Qatar and Oman. As part of the coronation events of Britain's King Charles III in London, the newly crowned monarch spoke with Herzog on Friday about the Israeli government's controversial judicial overhaul plan and commended him on his efforts to mediate a compromise with the opposition, Hebrew media reported late Saturday. Herzog and his wife were also said to have met with several world leaders during a reception at Buckingham Palace in honor of the heads of state and royals who flew in for the occasion, including shaking hands with the leaders of Qatar and Oman, which don't have formal diplomatic ties with the Jewish state. According to the Ynet news site, Charles identified Herzog in the crowd and personally arranged for him and his wife to be brought to the front of the line, speaking with them about the situation in Israel and the Middle East. When the topic of the overhaul came up, Herzog reportedly told the king that the public debate in Israel shows the country is a strong and vibrant democracy. Charles praised Herzog for initiating the talks on a potential compromise and said he considers this to be a very important effort. Mikal Herzog reportedly noted that her cousins had been good friends with the Charles's former cello teacher, a Jewish woman. But nonetheless, this was a poke in the face. He poked Netanyahu in the eye. This was a snub to Netanyahu. And it just goes to show that what's lurking in the background is of dire consequences to the sovereignty of the state of Israel. And I'm just going to leave it there for right now.